So the beautiful... So beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but it doesn't mean to say that's where the beauty is. The beautiful is out in the things themselves. And even a terrible tyrant like Stalin and Mao Zedong, the great jailer she's known as, and Lenin, those vicious criminal minds, even physically, they're a beautiful thing. I saw a python, a rock python in Australia. It looked absolutely beautiful. Now, I would never say a snake looks beautiful. You look at any snake book and they'll say, one nation has a hang-up about snakes. The Australians always mention that. They have a real hang-up about it. Of course we do. The 5 deadliest snakes in the world are in my state. And we're taught from little kids to beware of snakes in long grass, etc. But there are times when you could say it's a beautiful looking creature, as I saw that day, this python, on holidays. I was on holidays, not it. But it was so beautiful, but yet it's harmless, a python, because they keep them in warehouses around in the city of Sydney, right in the heart of Sydney. They keep them in warehouses to keep the rats down, that sort of thing. But sometimes it takes an effort to see the beauty of it. The first time I saw an amoeba under a microscope in the University of Sydney, I almost yelled for joy to see this little formless thing maneuvering through water. It was beautiful under the microscope. So we apprehend the beautiful in many ways and places. Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. Bom, 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 bom. Bom, that's not beautiful. Boom, that's not beautiful. But the notes put together, we grasp the relationship. So ultimately, it's an intellectual grasp of something. You may not see the beauty. We may be prejudiced by our wills. We might say, he's a nasty man, or I don't like him, I don't agree with him. That's what disturbs me with young people today, how they can take a dislike to somebody or dislike to a professor simply because they disagree with something he said. As for the attacks that some of us had to put up with from homosexuals particularly in campuses, it's terrible. Or are terrible, should I say. So this is immediate property of being through the medium of the good and the true. The beautiful is immediate property. But the beauty of a poem, the beauty of music, it's a relationship. And it takes the intellect to see that. Monkeys don't see the beauty of it. Although Father Gaffney says, in one place, he has the Psychology of the Internal Senses, I think it was the book. I've got the book at home, I can't remember the exact title. He says that a wolf on a lovely sunny day looks down and sees the glittering of a creek running through the valley. That he would see something there which was most pleasing to him, that water which he needed to drink. And the way that monkeys will scramble for a banana when somebody throws it in. So, all of these things are grasped by the intellect. Though there may be something sensitively beautiful for that wolf in the water. Gaffney brings that out very well. But now what makes up the beautiful? On page 60 at the top there, the characteristics. First, the integrity of the being, integrity of parts. It's all there. There's nothing missing. Secondly, due proportion. Something out of proportion doesn't look beautiful. Thirdly, the splendor of the form. We'll come back to those. The integrity of parts. Mona Lisa, for instance, in the Louvre in Paris, was in a big sort of a hallway there. I can remember the details. There's Socrates' bust just nearby. And she's got no arms. So she's lacking a part. But the sculptor did it deliberately to bring the splendor of the body out. They say that the knee and the hands are difficult parts for a sculptor or a painter. I saw in the caves at Lascaux, they closed them after that. Not because I was there, I hope. But they claimed they would not allow people to go in there. In fact, I was used to the Jenolan caves in Australia, which has the same sort of formation you find anywhere in the world. The Wombian caves and the Jenolan caves. You can go for 3/4 of a mile, and I've gone those distances under the mountains. But in the caves at Lascaux in the south of France, I got a shock. You just stepped in the cave, and next minute you're in the place there. Right immediately you saw the great bull painting on the wall, 8,000 years old. Then you could see another painting, and you could see another painting. What happened is paintings were there, and they think they had some symbolic meaning for ancient men. Over the years, calcite, which is transparent, formed over that writing, but ancient man couldn't see the painting that was already there. He couldn't see it because he only had just torches for visibility. But now with modern lighting, we can see the first lot of painting and another lot which must have been done 1,000 or 2 years later. Then there's a third lot. Again, calcite covered it. But the magnificent of a big bull on the run, and they say the formation of that painting was magnificent. Pope Pius XII and Abbé Bruy. Abbé Bruy was a famous archaeologist in France. Both said this: not evolution amongst the human race, it's devolution. Ancient man shows an intelligence that we could not understand. Their artistic ability in these drawings are magnificent. The Academy of Sciences a couple of years ago, the one who's the president now, she, Angela Puglisi, Dr. Puglisi, as we would say in English, she gave a lecture on this, and she'd never, on the caves of Lascaux, and she said she'd never been there. When she found out I had, she said, I wish you'd have told me this before I gave my lecture. She said, I need your information. If I can find it, I'll bring a book in to show you the caves, the pictures. But it's magnificent. The ancient man, these grasps of the beautiful, it must have been magnificent, primitive man. But these, Pius XII, of course, has been labelled as a great genius. They didn't want him to go into the priesthood. He was too delicate nature. But he said man is showing evidence of devolution, the same as Abbé Bruy. By the way, Abbé just means father in French. But I saw somebody talking about Teilhard de Chardin said, oh, this man was an abbé. He was better than more than a priest. If you're addressing a priest in French, writing about him, abbé so-and-so. That just means father so-and-so. That's all it means. We have different habits in different languages. So the integrity of parts, what ought to be there. But if the artist can deliberately leave something out and show his great art and still bring out the beauty. There was a famous Dr. Dobell in Australia, and an art competition which is held every year on religious art and all sorts of things. This man was painted, this Dobell, William Dobell was painted as an ogling looking fellow with bulging eyes, etc. And it brought out the genius of the man. The integrity of parts. I'm sorry, that really pertains to due proportion. That's the next one I should be coming to. Due proportion, not deformed. Litheness, elegance of walk, etc. In other words, some people have undue proportion. They may have long legs and they look as if they're too tall for their boots. But due proportion is something that ought to be there. That makes a lot of sense, of course. We can see that very readily. But the third one is the real one, splendor of form. It's called effulgence of form. In Latin, splendor formae. It is as if the form of the thing is bursting out over the matter. The matter is holding the form back. If, for instance, we plant an apple tree, that apple tree would be perfect, but the matter holds it back. Remember what the form is. Every bodily thing is made up of two principles. The form, which makes it belong to that species of thing, and the matter, which limits it to be this. The form makes the thing be universal. We have form, humanity, look at it all there. But our matter is different. That's why we have, some have a skating rink on their nose so the flies can take off like that, and others have a little bit less up on top here, etc. So a skating rink up there for the flies. But the form would burst out of the matter. I've always remember collecting Christmas bells in Australia. We have these lovely red and yellow bells like flowers growing down in the grass. Father Woodbury would love it for us to go out and collect Christmas bells around the Christmas time. And you can see them as if to say, hey, we're here, look at us, aren't we beautiful, look at us. That's the way it appears with the form. The matter limits it to being here and not there, to being this size and not that size, this shape, not that shape. Same with trees. Same with human persons. The matter limits who we are, what we are individually. In fact, based upon the matter, we are called individuals. Based upon the form, we're called persons. That is of extremely great importance in political theory. For instance, that pouting man, Benito Mussolini, he was a great individual. But it took a Francis of Assisi to be a great person. I can remember seeing films of Mussolini pouting and putting on all sorts of looks and things, and yeah, that's it, the chin up, wasn't it? Yeah, and that glorious monument to him in Rome. But when he died upside down and kicked to death.
Like a pig.
Like a pig, you're right, by his own people. Had a girl that came at Niagara University, by the way. She said in the class, he was a good man. My grandfather knew him. Your grandfather knew him, that doesn't make him a good man. But he was a good man, she said. And one day she came in very angry. She said, what is the matter with the people here? Don't they know I was only driving at 80 miles an hour on the thruway and the police stopped me? Don't they know I've only just been here 2 years and we drive like that in Europe? Troppo malo. Too bad. When I said about Mussolini, I said, he was a dictator and he subjected his own people to injustices. She said, you know, she came to my office one day, you know like me, I know. I'm sorry, I shouldn't be speaking like that, but I couldn't resist it. The students' eyes were popping out, they thought she was completely nuts. So there's a couple of lovely little texts there from St. Thomas. The appetite, inclination for the good, the beautiful, our appetites rest in that beautiful thing. I remember, I think I mentioned this last week possibly, a little mushroom. I can't even remember what colour you'd call it, crimson, little mushroom. I'm going down the Minamurra waterfalls, south of Sydney, southwest of Sydney. And this little, my uncle and I were climbing down, and I was looking at Marcantia, that little, lovely little plant growing in damp places. But here, suddenly in the middle of it, was this little crimson-coloured mushroom. It stood out as if to say, look at me, aren't I beautiful? Never mind the other things, look at me. The triumph of form over matter. Take a human person. We have qualities which all these other things don't have. A human person can develop the 4 moral virtues, the cardinal virtues, and the 6 intellectual virtues. Woodbury used to say, there is no excuse for not knowing them. Well, there might be an excuse, but they are so much development of the human person. Let me say a word or two, just for a second or two, about them. There are 3 virtues in the intellect which know for the sake of knowing. These are called the intellectual virtues. They're the speculative ones in which we look at the universe around us for the sake of knowing. There's wisdom, science, and intelligence, which some call understanding. Wisdom is knowledge of ultimate causes, ultimate things, and is the high point of education, by the way. Science is knowledge of things around us and within us. Intelligence is the basic principles from which all knowledge proceeds. For instance, the whole is greater than its part. Whatever undergoes movement is moved by another. And everybody has a sort of a primitive grasp of these principles. Sometimes we call that understanding. And that's one of the basic things of which our whole common sense starts from. Then there are the practical ones, the practical virtues. Synderesis, which is practical. This is knowledge of speculative principles, knowledge of practical principles. Then the next one is prudence. And finally, art. There's partly what education consists of. And the high point of education is wisdom. This is what should be taught to kids in school. Synderesis is basic knowledge of practical principles. A fellow ought to honour his father and mother, for instance. A man ought to love his children, etc. Person ought to come in out of the rain if they don't want to get a cold. Those sort of things. Now, but all of these things are in general. These two here are general principles. But prudence applies them here and now. A man ought to love his children. A prudent man will love his children here, knows how to love them here and now. He'll say to himself, I love my little son or my little daughter, but I've got to punish them for their own sake, right here and now. That's the prudent person, a person of good judgment. Now these behave to this sort of intellectual order. There are four virtues that enable us to teach us how to live our practical lives. First, there's temperance. Get control of ourselves with regard to pleasurable things. Nature's given us pleasures in things like sex, for instance, drinking and eating, particularly those three, has given us pleasure because nature wants us to do the acts in the right circumstances, not in the wrong circumstances, in the right circumstances. There are three principles about pleasurable things. Those that say, oh, pleasure is always the sign of a goodness of an act. Yes, that's hedonism. Those that say pleasure is the sign of a badness of an act. That's Puritanism. In Australia we call it wowserism. I'm not sure where the origin of that is. It probably means, wow, you shouldn't do that. But then the true teaching about pleasure is this. Pleasure is the sign of the goodness of an act in the right circumstances. That's the bit they leave out. So temperance. Control of ourselves with pleasurable things. Then fortitude. Control of ourselves in difficult situations. In other words, don't go berserk when something's happening to you. Let's stand and act rightly as we ought to act. I'll come back to that in a second. And the next one is, these two are individual virtues. The next one's a social virtue, justice, which is defined as to each his own. Sui suumque is Latin. Or, put it another way, giving to another what's due to them. Because jus, the first part of the word, means right. Giving to another what they've got a right to. Now these are all very well. Oh yes, I'm a brave man. Yes, I'm a brave man. But what about here and now? How should you behave justly or with fortitude? So another virtue is necessary for these three to apply the virtue here and now. It's called prudence. Prudence. So prudence is an intellectual virtue and it is a moral virtue. Prudence allows us to put reason into our lives. Reason into our lives. These three here. Here and now are going to be just. Let me use an exaggerated example. Supposing I found a pen in the classroom when you'd all gone home. What do I do? Do I put an ad in the Niagara Gazette and one in the Buffalo News and go into Paris and London and Australia and put an ad for advertisement to all the papers? Prudence might say, oh, wait till next class and ask. If nobody claims it, well, too bad. After all, it's only a pen. So prudence gives us good judgment. And as St. Thomas and Woodbury point out, start practicing here and now. Here and now, practice it. Practice justice, and you'll be just on all occasions. If you practice it, you build, as it were, on each act. And that's what we've got to do. So putting reason into our actions, see, this is in the intellect, the speculative intellect, the practical intellect. They're distinguished by their end. This is knowing for the sake of knowing, knowing for the sake of doing. Prudence concerns the doing of something. Art concerns the product. A ballerina, for instance, her art is magnificent, but it might be imprudent that she's dancing on this occasion. For instance, I saw Mass at Niagara University one occasion, the opening of the academic year. They had girls dancing ahead of the procession going to the altar. I nearly fell off my seat. I thought that was a highly imprudent act on that occasion. So there's helps us to see the beautiful. And the beautiful in a person is perfected by these virtues. Somebody might be just a small, insignificant person, but there springs out of them this beauty of virtue, this beauty of mind with respect to others, somebody who cares deeply about others, etc., etc. I remember Father Woodbury being shocked at a dance which we held once a year at the Academy in Australia, and some poor little girl sitting down the corner all by herself. Nobody asked her for a dance. And he said to me, he said, she's probably worth 10 of some of the others. A sweet little girl that everybody was bypassing based upon external appearances. So the person, the human person, there's the beauty of the substance, and this is quite apart from the beauty of the body, the facial appearance, etc. Remember Kevin and Betty, I've spoken before, the three of us used to sing. We used to sing in harmony, and we called ourselves the two hits and a miss. And we used to sing, down by the old mill stream, or wait till the sun shines, Nelly, etc. And we'd sing a beautiful harmony, then we'd break out into fun. And we caught the audience by surprise many times with that. But they used to go dancing together, the other two. And when Kevin was asked, when are you two getting married? Well, I'm not going to marry her. He was taken by her beauty, etc., and dancing, but he just didn't care about her. Mind you, she was worth 10 of him. We can perceive the beautiful in many ways. I remember lying awake in Cologne in Germany on New Year's Eve, hearing the great bells going. Oh, they were magnificent. The ground, the building almost shook. Brum, boom, 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 boom. That's how they seemed to go. And the bells just thundered out their tones. We see some mountains, streams, and a blue sky. The loveliness of a blue-eyed, curly-haired little child with cute freckles on her nose and a tiny lisp. You see the beauty of that. That can be an external beauty. Then we might see that she's a little wretch when she's with other children and it deserves to be spanked, given a good kick on the BOT Tom. The beautiful means that whose very apprehension gives pleasure, as St. Thomas says. Read those through for yourself there. Here's a question that I've put in. If God has no parts, we'll prove that later, How can he have integrity of parts and due proportion? He doesn't need to. It's the splendor of form that's the principle. That's only required for bodily things, the splendor of form that he's got. I remember going to, as I had to periodically go to the diplomatic corps in Ottawa, which is the capital city of Canada, of course. And I can remember the High Commissioner for Pakistan and his wife and his daughter. They were distinguished, and of course she was dressed in sari and all the rest of it. And beautiful people, lovely, distinguished people. And then she said to me, I hear you teach philosophy. Do you teach revolutionary philosophy? What? I said, not in your life. And the famous statue in the Louvre in Paris called Venice de Milo, or Venice de Milo. How can it be beautiful since the arms are cut off? Well, I've explained that. The great skill of the artist is bringing out, in spite of that defect, bringing out the effulgence of form. She has a most beautiful and graceful body, even if she is nude. Then right round the corner from it, in a corridor, I can remember seeing a group of about 4 or 5 people. What are they looking at? Then I saw the Mona Lisa. And it's just a little picture only about that big, a 12 by 10 inches or something, small thing. And I looked at it. And I thought, there's somebody in the way a bit. So I walked around and her eyes followed me around. Her eyes followed me. Then I saw the carpet was worn in a semicircle. People had been walking backwards and forwards. And I said, you too. So it was a beautiful statue. But what he captured there, and all he's got is the head and I think the top of the shoulders, if I remember correctly. But the eyes just moved with you. What the artist was able to capture in that picture is extraordinary. Aristotle remarked that the sign of a great artist is that he can make a bad work of art deliberately. And this is far better than the poor artist who makes a bad work of art because of his art is faulty. So, on page 61 we come to the kinds of beauty. We more or less implied this as we go along. First of all, there's the beauty of the substance. Beauty of the person. And as I explained, these perfect the beauty. And as St. Thomas well explains, something can perfect them. Grace, which is a Christian concept, but nevertheless a true concept. Nevertheless, it's founded in fact and needs to be explained, and St. Thomas explains that. It doesn't take away any of our humanity, it perfects it, builds on it. So we can have prudence, which is an inspired prudence. Many great writers have talked about that. We can have an inspired prudence, which gives us great judgment. There was one man who had that stood out enormously. He was dumb with his philosophical and theological studies. But when it came to this inspired prudence, his name, can anybody tell me?
St. John Vianney.
That's it, St. John Vianney. And he's called a priest. He was inspired, had judgment, in excellent judgment. And he saw people somewhat like Padre Pio, who's now Saint Pio, P-I-E-O. He was another man that had tremendous prudential judgment. People came, thousands, to see Pio. Thousands came to see him all over Italy. They knew what his judgment was. So the substantial beauty, the beauty of the person, such as the beauty of the person. And the accidental beauty, beauty of shape, walk, colour, etc. of a flower. And the accidents perfect a thing and give it its beauty in these other things other than man. For instance, gold is perfected by its colour. The yellow colour perfects gold. They're perfected by the accident. And we are perfected by the accidents as well as having the substantial perfection. If a person has virtue, that's something added to the person. If a person has skill and gives good judgment about something, we respect that person. He might be a wonderful footballer, a wonderful basketballer, but he might be a rascal. We might admire his basketball ability, but we detest his other vices. But a person can be perfected by many things, and grace is the ultimate perfection. By the way, let me say a word or two of what that means. Supposing we took a tree, and we could humanize that tree, give it human qualities, or a kangaroo, which we cannot, of course, but supposing we could. Well, God takes us and divinizes us. That's what grace is. Gives us some divinity, a touch of divinity, as it were, and raises the person above their individuality, become a more godlike personality. And that doesn't have to be in, like, the pictures down at the shrine here being sold like St. Thomas Aquinas. He wasn't a sissy namby-pamby. He was a great man, not an enormously built man, as they make him out to be, or a pretty little, what we call it, pansy, like they've got these other pictures. I'll bring you out a real picture and I'll show it you. And it was painted by a Jewish girl in Australia, under direction from research in what St. Thomas really was like. What it was, 6 of his brothers took to hold him down on one occasion. Something like that. So, my friends, there's what took the world by surprise with Mother Teresa. I landed at Calcutta airport and I was looking out the window and I thought, oh my God, what I could see right running along the side of the airport, these hovels. It's where people were living. And Mother Teresa worked amongst those people. What a beautiful person she was. We had her speaking at Niagara University, and the students were opening champagne bottles and aiming the corks at her. I couldn't believe it. And one just missed her. It was being talked about by the students. I was removed from the little group that had to supervise the marshals, one of the marshals of the students. Students complained that I asked them to leave their champagne bottles behind when they went in to graduate. You were there, Professor Powers. You saw this, Professor Bonnet. You were there. Saw this, all this. So the individual is founded in matter, and the characteristics are sensed. There are great persons and great individuals. Napoleon, great individual, as a demonstration of his appeasement of his own individual craving, he had sexual intercourse with 10 women before he went into battle. So Father Woodbury, who used to read these things up a lot, used to read about Napoleon. Napoleon's attitude was this: when he's going into battle and the enemy was overwhelming, they came to him and said, "Qu'est-ce qu'on va faire? What are we going to do?" He said, "Attaquez, attaquez, attaquez. Attack. Don't sit down and let them beat us. Let's attack them." And when, incidentally, when the crowds in Paris were revolting because they didn't have enough food, what did he say? The lieutenants came to him and said, "What do we do, General?" Or Mon Général, as they say in French. He said, "Give them buckshot." What does rioting do? What does that do? That just inhibits any attempts to feed them. So, the essential division on page 61. There's beauty of the sensible and beauty of the spiritual. And beauty of the spiritual can be intellectual or can be moral. There it is. There's intellectual, there's the moral. These on the board. There's accidental division of beauty. There's beauty simply, and beauty of the exceeding. In other words, somebody who's extraordinarily beautiful. We call that sublime or sublimity. Beauty of the incomplete, we call that prettiness. I don't know whether I spelled prettiness rightly there or not. Beauty of the exceeding. I was tempted to write such as Ava Gardner, but I thought I'd better not. Men and women. a comparison of their ability to perceive beauty. Men with their kinds of intellects tend to perceive the beauty of the whole being. Women with their kinds of intellects tend to perceive the details. That is something which I teach in ethics, that men with their kind of intellects tend to see, for instance, the whole class. They perceive this. But if you go out of that room and you ask one of the women, what did Mrs. Vanari wear, or what did Jenna wear, they could tell you. But men say, oh, I don't know what she wore. I can remember coming home from a family wedding, and I said to my mother, no, my mother said to me, did you see that dress that so-and-so was wearing? I said, yeah, red doesn't suit her. It wasn't red, it was blue. So, difference. So women should be far better than men. For instance, in medical diagnostics. But in battle, when you're watching over a whole army, men should be better at supervision of that. Different modes of outlook. So I've often thought that a woman physician would be really a wonderful person to have. That's why nurses make such beautiful nurses, I think. They tend to see the details. They can see get the greatest sensitivity to the little things that are happening to somebody. So, but it is a fact, and the philosopher should always pay attention to the facts. We recognize beautiful scenery, literature, music, poetry, painting, flowers. There is an opera. You rarely hear it. The other morning I heard the overture to that opera, The Jewels of the Madonna. It's out of this world. You never hear it. You've heard it? Yes. It's beautiful, isn't it? The first time I heard it, I was just lifted out of this world. And the other morning I said, I wonder if that's from The Jewels of the Madonna. And Shelley Barbour on CBC said, you've heard that gorgeous piece of music, The Jewels of the Madonna. We see that in everything. Painting, flowers. I remember Father Woodbury perceiving somebody walked up to the painting of this Jewish girl I mentioned at St. Thomas. He came up and said, yeah, that's a beautiful painting. And Woodbury said, the bloody thing's meant to be looked at, not smelled. He says, the fellow went right up and peering at it like that. That's why we have to step back and see things like that. But those that do not recognize beauty as something objective, something that's out there that we're perceiving, they forget. When women wear different clothing, there's always colour involved. Or where they wear when women are putting on makeup, and men will wear a nice tie and a nice suit. I have a friend who changes his entire wardrobe once or twice a year. No, once a year or every 2 years. Changes his entire wardrobe, which shows he's very sensitive to the way he looks in the clothing he wears. So, men what was that?
Or rich.
Oh, rich. Yeah. He is rich and he's single. He's about 45 or 48, something like that. He's single and very rich. So, even painting out motor vehicles, somebody said when I bought a new car, not a used car, what colour is it? The first thing they asked me, what colour is it? I said, doesn't it mean more than the colour? It happened to be red. But now on page 62, great works. Mortimer Adler, the very well-known American philosopher, a very excellent man, is a great Aristotelian. He and Woodbury in Sydney, Australia, and a group of us were having dinner one night, and he was saying about great books of the Western world. There's a whole series known as the Great Books of the Western World. I have them. I think there are 60 volumes. And Mortimer Adler said that something about the great books. And Woodbury came and said, the mark of a great book is that every time you read it, you get something more out of it. You grasp something more in the intelligibility of the book. So, and Woodbury always pointed that also to paintings. The more you look at a great painting, a great work, you get something out of it. Great music. You get something out of it. A friend used to send me, excuse me, I better dress myself. Fred used to send me tapes of music, and he sent one to me. I don't know what it was now, Krosnak or something, I've forgotten now. He said, I hate it, but I'm learning to like it. Sometimes you have to learn to see the beauty. We progress in our understanding of the beauty. I think I heard it once and I've never listened to it since. He had greater patience than I did in trying to understand the beautiful. But you might hear music and you may not hear it. But you may hear it on a certain occasion. You say, well, that's good. Yes, it's beautiful. I can see that. Then you listen to it another time, it starts to grow on you. You know, some people, sometimes you'll hear people whistling a piece. And you say, he whistles it every day when he goes walking anywhere because it's growing on him. So sometimes it takes time to see the beautiful. It's not necessarily perceived in the first grasp of the intellect. I have described contemporary art as a fit having a nightmare. I remember seeing a big cattle station in Australia. I heard about this cattle station, and the farmer had 6 sons there, and they raised cattle for beef. And he called the place Focus. So I said, why do you call it Focus? Well, that's where the sons raised meat. It's 8:30. Thank you.